That's a good start. The weather was even a better start, and we'll just see how long that holds. But at least we all got here without the elements. I'm Doug Dibbert, and it's a delight to welcome you to day 2 of our spring reunions. A special word of thanks to the class of '66 that really helped to shape the agenda, and to Anna Louise Aguilar, who is here today, who actually made all the logistics come together. This is may be perceived by some of you who were here last year as a repeat. I suspect that it's not really a repeat, not just because Jim Delaney's not celebrating a reunion and therefore is not part of the panel, but the issues have evolved in the past year, and this is an opportunity for you and for us to have a review of where we are. We will go through a series of questions that have been identified in advance, and then you'll have the opportunity. We'll bring 3x5 cards if you have some questions you'd like to pose to one or more of the panelists. We do have a pretty hard close at 10:45 because most, if not all of you, are anxious to make it over to the Old Students Club, which has a long tradition of starting promptly. As a matter of fact, it'll be a big surprise if it's not already full when we get over there. People come early. So I'm not going to introduce the panelists because you are all capable of reading. I'm not even going to review their bios because you all have those. And I'm going to begin with the first question to the Provost, James Dean. In what ways are student athletes like other students? In what ways are they different? What are the implications of these similarities and differences for their academic careers?
Thanks, Doug. Is my mic on? It didn't seem to be on a minute ago. How about now? Hello.
Works.
Okay. I think I have a future as a DJ. It's not a good future, but it's a future nevertheless. So the question was, how are student athletes and other students alike? How are they different? And what implications does that have for what we do here at the university? So the major point that I would want to leave you with on this point is that the similarities between student athletes and other students vastly outweigh the differences. They are alike in so many more ways than they're different. And the differences do matter, but the differences are really ones of degree rather than qualitative differences. So let me talk about the ways in which they're similar. They're incredibly bright. We just had in this space last week a celebration of the academic accomplishments of student athletes that I wish you all could have been to. We had 3 academic All-Americas, one from soccer, one from volleyball, and one from basketball. We had 40 student athletes who had had perfect GPAs in 1 or 2 semesters, and we had on and on and on a set of people who had just done tremendous accomplishments. So similarities in terms of how smart they are, how diverse they are. Student athletes, like our student body, are incredibly diverse in every way that you can be diverse. Also incredibly hardworking with a wide range of interests. I think both our student athletes and our other students who are not athletes are incredibly good at time management. Time management is the #1 requisite skill of college students these days. And the other similarity between student athletes and non-athlete students is that they are probably not going to be professional athletes. So, what are some of the differences? I would say that student athletes might be slightly more busy than non-athlete students, but the differences there are relatively small. Many students have jobs. If you look at students in music and drama, and you look at their rehearsal time and their performance time, I would say it's at least as much as student athletes practice and play. Students have positions as resident advisors in student government, in the hundreds and hundreds of clubs and so on. So those are some differences, and a handful of student athletes, and it is a handful, aspire to be professional athletes. So in both cases, so what do we do about that? And here it really converges again. What we need to do is to provide as broad and deep a set of learning opportunities as possible for all of our students, including those who are varsity athletes. And just to give you a couple examples of how we're working on this, we've recently created a set of leadership development opportunities for student athletes for credit. There's always been, and has been for a number of years, a number of leadership development opportunities within the Department of Athletics, and we realized that some of the things that were happening for student athletes that they weren't getting credit for were some of the very same things that student non-athletes were getting credit for. And so we've tried to provide some of those opportunities for student athletes. And one other thing that we're working on beyond leadership development is opportunity for study abroad. And because of their schedules, it has been somewhat difficult for student athletes to study abroad, and we're working on several projects right now that would give student athletes increased opportunity to spend some time overseas.
Thank you, Jim. Lisa, how have recent NCAA legislative changes increased student athlete well-being?
Well, there are a number of things that have happened recently. Most significant is probably something called cost of attendance. Some of these changes are in reaction to things that we've read about in the newspapers, and this closely followed or reacted to the O'Bannon litigation. But previously, student athletes who received a full grant and aid got tuition, fees, room and board, and books as their package. And if you go on every university's website, there is a page that talks about the full cost of attendance, which includes those elements, but also additional items such as health insurance, travel to and from campus, and miscellaneous spending money. And so effective, I think, this fall for the first time, was the full cost of attendance. So those student athletes who do receive a full grant and aid get an additional amount of several $1,000s on top of that to help compensate them for those other expenses. So that's a very significant change. And that was brought about through the Autonomy 5 conferences, so a subset of conferences within the Division I NCAA. Another thing that I think is really significant is the impact of student athletes now in the governance processes at the DJ, you ready? at the NCAA, ACC, and university level. So of those 5 autonomy conferences, there are, including the ACC, Big Ten, and so on, there are 65 schools. Each school has 1 vote. There are also 15 student athletes in that group. Each of them have 1 vote as well. They represent 3 student athletes from each of the 5 conferences. So that's a very significant student athlete voice in the legislative process. Student athletes also participate in the ACC governance meetings now. We will be going to them next week, and there will be student athletes in participation there. On our campus level, we have added student athletes to the Faculty Athletics Committee, which Joy chairs, to the process review group, which Jim and Bubba chair, and to various other groups around campus to provide us a student athlete voice. And then I think a third change, and then I'll stop, is health and well-being of student athletes. So there's been a lot of attention to concussions, concussion protocol. The NCAA has hired a chief medical officer, Brian Hainline, who is bringing a lot of attention to how can we protect our student athletes and make sure they are competing in the safest environment possible. Miscellaneous thing I'll just add, since we're sitting here in the blue zone also, is a couple of years ago, the NCAA deregulated the meals that could be provided to student athletes. There had previously been an infamous rule called the fruits, nuts, and bagels rule. That was all you could provide in terms of snacks to student athletes on top of room and board if they were getting that. And there was even regulation about what could be put on top of the bagel. That was deregulated, and we now have here in the blue zone something called the fueling station, which provides snacks to student athletes during the day. So a good development for them.
And what are the options of what can go on top of the bagel?
I think it's deregulated now.
Bubba, as a commercial activity in sports has increased, what has been the impact on the collegiate experience for the student?
Well, first of all, Doug, thanks for hosting this. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for being here. I think I'll get to that question in just a second, but just by the very nature that it's the provost, the FAR, the athletic director, and the chair of our faculty, I mean, I think institutionally it just demonstrates where we are as an institution, and that at times is in conflict with the commercial activity associated with sport. and how a lot of schools, the athletic department and its athletic enterprise has separated from the academy. And I think this is a great demonstration that it has not here, even though the commercial activity is much greater than it's been in the last 30 or 40 years. You know, with the growth of cable television, the growth of sports through the media, the economics of intercollegiate athletics has really changed dramatically. And what many schools have tried to do is provide better experiences for students. But we are trading off a traditional academic experience for a different, quote-unquote, lifestyle, if you will. Part of the cost of attendance is because we don't have as much time for student athletes to do internships, to get jobs in the summer. So as a trade-off for cannibalizing their time, we're now trying to provide additional resources to them. We try to provide more through the fueling station because we have taken a lot of their time where they can barely get to the dining hall for a meal. So as they would go to class, come over to this building, work out, go to the fueling station, go to another class, come back, have study hall, we tend to separate them from the rest of the student body. So as the revenue has gone up, we try to replace it through things that we can buy on behalf of the student. I don't think it's the best thing, and I think over the last 25 years, we've somewhat lost our way. In that the creation of the revenue isn't the challenge, because we've been very good at creating additional revenue. This building is a good example of it. I mean, this building generates more revenue than we spend in bond money, but the money in excess of the debt service goes to scholarships, which is a great thing. If the use of the money is appropriate, then the growth in the commercialism is fine. Where I think we've lost our way is in building very opulent facilities. I don't think we have them here. I do think there are some in the country. I think salaries are a challenge, and each and every time we've tried to control salaries, that goes to litigation, which creates another problem for us. So that is a very difficult one for us to challenge. But I think the economics have created more tension than has traditionally been on a campus between the academy and the athletic department. And I think we're one of the schools that has managed it very well, but that doesn't mean we've eliminated the tension.
Thank you, Bubba. Joy, what is the role of the faculty in supporting and monitoring and shaping the intersection between academics and athletics?
Well, faculty have a couple of roles that have nothing to do with athletics, but then also bridge into athletics. And of course, the first and primary role that we think about the faculty having is to provide supportive and innovative and we like to think here at Carolina the best learning experiences for our students while they're here. And in addition to that, providing them with feedback on how well they are reaching the learning goals that we set for them. But on top of teaching, we also have the role and responsibility for upholding and implementing university policies and procedures and making sure that we follow those policies and procedures, we carry out that teaching role. And thirdly, we have the responsibility for alerting administrators when we find that there's some decisions or some activities happening on campus we think impair our ability to carry out the first two roles. So those are in general that we have regarding any teaching activity we have on campus. But specifically to athletics and academics, we can carry out those roles with some additional support and resources, actually. In terms of the informing piece, we can inform the Faculty Athletics Committee, the Academic Support Program for Student Athletes, or the Process Review Group. If we see that there's an athletic program or a specific student athlete who's making decisions that make it difficult for students to be successful in their academics here, whether that be in a particular course, a particular major, or as we mentioned earlier, their ability to participate in a full range of academic activities here, such as externships and study abroad. There also can carry out this responsibility by informing department chairs, or we also have now many confidential and anonymous reporting mechanisms if they see or suspect a breach in policies and procedures. And lastly, we encourage faculty to participate in campus discussions that are related to the direction of college athletics, not only on this campus, but nationally, and how we see those. Occasionally, we perceive those as driving us in a direction that could be away from the mission of the university, or creating a climate where we think that the students' academic success or their health or well-being is not the primary objective of that movement. So if we see anything happening with college athletics here or nationally, we would like to have college discussions about how we can make sure they don't undermine the students' experience here at Carolina.
Thank you. Back to Jim. What working relationship between academic and athletic leaders best serves the interest of the student athletes?
That's a great question. Excuse me. So it's a truism among senior administrative people in universities that every day we're in situations that we don't remember being covered in graduate school. And yet this is the exception. So I don't know what version of my bio you have, but I have a PhD in organizational behavior. And I very clearly remember reading a book in my first year of graduate school called Differentiation and Integration by two famous Harvard Business School professors, Lawrence and Lorsch. And they addressed this question. What is it when you have different parts of an organization that have different sort of sub-goals? How should they work together? And their answer, based on study, it's probably done in the 60s, if I remember correctly, or maybe the 70s, their answer was that each group should try and pursue its own interests really strenuously and then have some kind of mechanism to bring them together, even though they're sort of working on different things. I'm summarizing a book this big, so a little bit of an oversimplification. You know, now that I've been living this for quite some period of time, I'm not as convinced that that answer is right. Again, to remind you of the question, should be the relationship between the senior people in athletics and the senior people in academics? To simplify it further, Bubba and me. And, you know, I could take the position that Bubba needs to worry about athletics and, you know, he's on his own with that, and I'm going to jealously guard everything having to do with academics, and we'll, you know, negotiate or something like that. But I don't think that's what we've done, and I think it's actually worked well. If I really thought that Bubba Cunningham was only concerned about the athletics mission of the university and was willing to do anything to facilitate that mission, even at the cost of academics, we'd have a very different relationship than the wonderful collaborative professional relationship that we do have. And I think by the same token, if Bubba thought that I didn't really care at all about anything having to do with athletics, then we wouldn't have been able to get to some of the places that we've been able to get to. So yes, I mean, I am the chief academic officer of the university, and I care really, really strongly about the academic success of all of our students. But I realize this is a big, complicated university. We do a lot of different things. And actually, I also realize that athletics is an important part of the education of our students, certainly the student athletes, but beyond that. So I think that we both need to be vigilant in making sure that our parts of the university are really successful, but like any other pair of senior colleagues at the university, we need to respect one another's mission and try and figure out, at the end of the day, what's best for the students.
Thank you. Lisa, are the time demands on student athletes related to athletic participation too great? And if so, how can a better balance between athletics and academics be achieved?
Time demands is a very hot topic now on our campus and at the NCAA level. In fact, at the last NCAA convention, when the Autonomy 5 conferences met, we resolved that we would deal with legislation on time demands for student athletes at the next convention this coming January. So there are discussions going on about that right now. There's also been a lot of data recently collected about time demands on student athletes, and I'll just read you some figures from one recent NCAA survey that was nationwide among Division I student athletes. They reported the time per week that they devote to athletics in season is 34 hours per week. The time per week they devote to academics in season is more than that, fortunately. It's 38.5 hours. Well, I did the math this morning. That's 72 and a half hours a week. That's a substantial time commitment that doesn't leave time for much else. Now, on top of that, there are current NCAA regulations that limit the number of countable athletically related activities, called CARA in our world, to 20 hours a week when a student athlete is in season. So how do we get to 34 hours a week via the student athlete's self-report? I don't think it's, by and large, coaches cheating. I don't think that's it at all. It's that some stuff doesn't count in a countable athletically related activity, like getting taped, reviewing film, and so on. Or if it does count, sometimes it is limited. Bubba has a great example of all the time that student athletes spend on game day getting ready for a football game. It's pretty much the whole day. It counts 3 hours, no matter how long they're actually spending. So they do probably spend 34 hours a week on 34 hours a week on athletically related activities. Is that too much? I don't know. I think in the current discussions, we're trying to figure out how can that time be used most efficiently? How can the student athlete's time be used more efficiently so maybe the number of hours that they report and actually spend is less? How can we preserve time for them to get the rest that they need every night? Do we have to protect a period after they return from campus from an away competition so that they have 8 hours before they can be expected to come back and participate in any athletically related activity? They already get 1 day off a week during their in-season. Is there an opportunity to provide additional days off throughout their competitive season, in a way that makes sense given their competitive schedule? Can we provide them their schedules far enough in advance so that they can plan the time they do have free and use it effectively to get their hair cut, do group work with students in classes, visit home, whatever. So I think those are all good things that we're looking at, and I think that we all need to, as Jim was just saying, work together, athletics and academics, to think about when our class is being offered, when our practices, what is practice time, is there a way to juggle there to make sure that the time is being used most efficiently, that student athletes aren't blocked out of certain classes or majors because of the availability or non-availability of classes. So those are all good things. At the same time, we balance against every student athlete and coach's desire for excellence and their competitive instinct. So they're always going to want to do more, to be the best that they possibly can be in the competitive field. So there is a tension and a balance there, and we have to figure out how to navigate that. I also think a lot of this goes back to the youth sports phenomenon. And people now are spending days, weekends, missing classes as high school students to attend club events and so on. And sometimes student athletes find they have fewer competitions when they get to college than they did in this high school and club setting. So I think in some sense, things start and build at that level, and maybe we also need to get a handle on that in addition to intercollegiate athletics. And finally, I'll close with this. Nikki Moore, who works for Bubba in athletics, I heard her recently comment on this time demands issue and said, we want to be careful here, because one of the things that employers and others value so much about hiring student athletes is their ability to juggle a complex schedule and to get everything done. And if we need to understand that that's a value, that's a skill that they learn because of these competing things that they are learning how to juggle. We just need to think hard, I think, over the next couple of years about, is there a way to make it somewhat more manageable and to make the juggling act a little bit less risky for them?
Bubba, in light of the recent NOA, what is the process and when can we anticipate a resolution?
Well, this is the longest I've ever been in an event that question hasn't been asked.
Surprised you're asking the question. It would have been asked earlier.
Well, actually, I'll take that back. I actually got asked it before I got up here. The process is, we received the amended notice. We have 90 days to respond. The NCAA then has 60 days to respond to us, and then we get an appointment with the Committee on Infractions, and typically 6 to 8 weeks following the appointment with the Committee on Infractions, you get a response. So if you do the math on that, it's likely to conclude around the first of the year, the calendar year. So not a great timetable. It's been going on for quite some time. So that's the process that we're engaged in. I frequently get asked, will we take the full 90 days? Well, every person in the notice of allegation has the full 90 days. So I do anticipate it will take 90 days, whether it's us or someone else that has been named in the notice. So I think that timetable is pretty accurate.
The time they take at the end to determine what, if any, sanctions, you indicated was 6 to 8, but the last time it was considerably more than that. What falls into determining how long they take?
That's a great question, and as complicated and as long as this case has been, 6 to 8 maybe undershooting it, but it is entirely up to the Committee on Infractions. The way it works now, it used to be the Committee on Infractions was 8 people, and they heard every single case. Now, because of the slowness of the process, they've increased it to 21 people on the Committee on Infractions, and then you're impaneled with 8 to 10 people that will actually hear your case. And then it will be their responsibility to write a response, which would articulate any sanctions that would come with a finding of a violation of a bylaw. So I can't give you an answer of how long it's going to take. There are 8 people that are in the industry that comprise the Committee on Infractions. So like a jury of your peers, although I prefer to call it a jury of your competitors, I am not a fan of the Committee on Infractions. I think that the days that a jury of your peers was appropriate, I think has come and gone. I think that we should have professional mediators or arbitrators that could adjudicate these cases more quickly. I think you would get a better outcome. I think the people in the industry would feel better about those outcomes. I just don't think that people that you're going to compete against every day should be determining your fate. And I understand the logic behind knowing the industry and knowing the nuances of college athletics, but my goodness, judges and juries are dealing with murder cases and all kinds of things. They're pretty smart people that it doesn't take them long to figure it out. So figuring out whether or not we broke a rule, I think any really good judge or mediator could do that.
Thanks, Bubba. Joy, where do you draw the line between appropriate assistance for student athletes to be successful and a support system that places the student athlete in a secondary role related to decisions regarding their university experiences?
Well, as with all students, you try to find that sweet spot between being supportive and not being enabling. So we do that for all of our students and try to make sure that we provide them with the services to help them be successful while they're here at Carolina. So while in college, we want to help students to cross that bridge from the very regimented, supervised high school experience to getting them to adulthood, where they're going to be making independent career decisions and life decisions. And students come to Carolina at variable spots on that bridge. Some are already halfway across that bridge, and some of them are still trying to find the bridge that they're going to cross. And so I believe that Dr. Michelle Brown, the director for the Academic Support Program for Student Athletes, has really hit on the right answer here. For each student athlete who arrives here at UNC, they are developed their own individual academic plan that takes them where they are and gets them each year to where they need to be in order to graduate and be successful here at Carolina in the way that they determine what their success should be. And in that academic plan, it helps them with knowing what their study hall time should be, what type of learning specialist support they need, what type of tutors they might need, and helps them organize their time and management, which goes back to the time demands, such that they can meld in their academic responsibilities as well as their athletic responsibilities. And it guides them toward more and more independent learning. So a student athlete coming here in their freshman year may have a very specific individualized plan their freshman year. Once they prove themselves in courses and we find where their strengths and weaknesses are, their academic plan is altered for their sophomore year, junior, and senior year with the intent of them being an independent learner by the time they reach their senior year. However, again, as with many of our students here at Carolina, they may require assistance throughout their whole time here. And that can be because of learning difficulties, it can be because of challenges with organization, it can be from a variety of things, and we see that. I'm an academic advisor and have been one for almost 30 years, and I see students all over this campus that need a different type of support at different points in time during their academic time here at Carolina. What we do not promote here is allowing students to not be engaged in their major decisions and their course decisions. As you can imagine, we do have some students who would love for us to tell them what to major in and just tell them every semester what classes to take. They don't want to think about it, don't want to have to worry about it, don't want to have to do the planning of it. And here we have each student athlete meets with an academic advisor at least once each semester to discuss their major, discuss their progress toward degree, as well as them having their academic counselors and the academic support program for student athletes who meet with them on a more regular basis to make sure that they're reaching those goals and that they still understand the path that they're on. So the students are engaged with counselors and with advisors every semester in making those major decisions and making those course decisions. So the university has invited and provided students with an opportunity to participate in sports at the collegiate level. And here at Carolina, they're participating at the highest collegiate level, and that's a lot of responsibility. And the students' commitment to embracing and accepting that opportunity means that they have taken on a part-time or a full-time job, along with being a full-time student. And the relationship between the university and the student means that each side has to provide the appropriate efforts to ensure that the student's academic success is there, while recognizing that no one-size-fits-all model is going to work for all of our student athletes.
Okay, the final two questions are for all the panelists, and we'll go in reverse order. They know these two are coming. What are the greatest myths about intercollegiate athletics today? And more specifically, what are the greatest myths about athletics at Carolina today? Joy?
Probably one of the biggest myths has to do with the money, and I know you're surprised I'm saying that, Bubba, but that it's not all about the money. I've had the opportunity to work very closely with student athletes, and it's not all about the money and them going into professional sports and et cetera. It really is a growth and learning experience for both the student athletes and the students around them, and I still firmly believe in college sports and where they have a place in the university. For this campus, I'm still answering questions about who we admit to our programs, and as Jim Dean alluded to earlier, we have an extremely bright 800-plus student athletes here on this campus. They can read, they can function here at Carolina. We have a very, very well-established admissions process that we go through, and has a faculty committee that vets out students who are coming to the university. So I think if people are asking, are we admitting qualified students to UNC who are participating in collegiate sports, I can tell you that is not a myth. We are admitting qualified students to UNC who can be successful academically as well as athletically.
I think one of the myths is that you can solve it with a simple answer. I mean, as Joy mentioned, there's 800 student athletes on our campus. There's 470,000 that the NCAA tries to manage through 3 different divisions. You know, we have some student athletes who walk on and participate in their sport, and they've never played their sport before they got here, and they can compete at a Division I level and have a wonderful experience. We have other students that have been competing in their sport since they were 5 years old, and their ambition is to play professionally. They come to a university and they have a totally different background of an academic experience, totally different background from an athletic experience. Their expectations of the university are entirely different. What they want to get out of their educational experience is entirely different. So to come up with a single model that's going to work for every school, it just isn't possible. But I think people would like us to say, we're going to do X and that will solve all of our problems. But if you're a participant in football and basketball, you are generating a lot of money right now. But a lot of that, all of that money is used to fund all of our other programs. And so if you don't generate the money, then you can have fewer opportunities for those other kids to participate. And we can tinker with the model and figure out how we should allocate the resources. But to think that one model is going to work for everybody simply is not true. I think about the HBCUs. I think about the 17 schools within our system. We're very, very different. Yet we want one central management organization that's going to create a level playing field so you can compete athletically with the same competition, yet we've got a whole other group that's going to regulate and manage the academic experience at that institution. So there's not a single answer, but I think by and large, what we provide, particularly what we provide here, is exceptional because students can do what they want to do. They can have a great academic experience and compete at the highest level. But that takes flexibility, it takes creativity, and it takes some tension that is going to be something we just have to manage as we move forward.
I think the same myth, both nationally and on campus, that anybody that you see walking around in athletic gear that's a student athlete is getting a full ride to the university. And that is not the case. There is a weird thing, which I learned about when I became the FAR, called head count sports and equivalency sports. So some sports, if you are participating in getting athletic aid, you are getting the full ride. And those would be men's basketball, football, and in the women's sports, women's basketball, gymnastics, tennis, and volleyball. I think I got that right. Every other sport is an equivalency sport. So they have a designated number of scholarships, but they can be divided up any way the coach sees fit. So for instance, women's soccer, a very successful sport on our campus and very popular sport nationally, has the equivalent of 14 full scholarships. So if you are a Mia Hamm type, you might get a full scholarship to come play for Anson, but if you're not, you might get a much smaller percentage scholarship, or maybe even none, and be a recruited walk-on. So a lot of student athletes are participating here at a very high level and receiving relatively little financial aid, which takes me back to that youth sports thing that I was talking about. So if you're a parent and spending thousands of dollars to take your child all across the country to participate on a club team because you think that's their ticket to college and a free education, you could be sadly mistaken. Better off to put that money in a savings account and save it for the college tuition. Encourage your young person to play in multiple different sports so that they don't risk overuse injuries. Brian Hainline, the chief medical officer of the NCAA, has commented on some of the other data that we've received about the number of students who specialize in one sport pre-puberty and what that could potentially do to their health long-term by having that constant repetitive motion of that same sport for such a long period of time. So not every student athlete is on a full ride. Many are not. So if you're steering your women student athletes, tell them they need to play basketball, gymnastics, tennis, or volleyball. For some reason, I don't understand why, I don't know the history of it, those sports were singled out to be the head count sports.
Before Jim responds, if there are those of you who have questions and have not yet submitted them to Anne Louise, if you'd raise your hand, she will get you a card and something with which to write.
So are these going to be vetted?
We hope we don't have to vet them. We have a limited amount of time.
So I knew it was going to be bad for me to be the fourth person answering this question. All the good myths have been taken. But I will add one that is unique to Carolina and not about the national scene, which my colleagues know better than I do in terms of athletics. And I would summarize that myth, which is being propagated intentionally, although they know that it's false, by a number of people. And that is that there's really no difference between 2016 and, say, 2006 at this university. The expectations have risen. We've been through a really difficult time. And I would say that hundreds of people have spent tens of thousands of hours trying to develop what we're doing at the intersection of athletics and academics. And we are a far, far different and a far, far better university in that question of student athletes, especially with respect to their academic pursuits. Some of this stuff gets, some of what you've heard already gets pretty technical. Some of it gets even more technical. We would bore you to tears talking about the details of what we've been through to try and make things better. But, you are our representatives. You're part of our community. You're out there around North Carolina, around the country, and for all I know, around the world representing us. You need to know that this university right now is as strong as it has ever been, and stronger than it's ever been, and frankly stronger than many, many of our competitors, to use the term Bubba used, in terms of how we really think about the relationship between athletics and academics. We've really built a program to be very proud of, and I hope that you'll be proud of it as our alumni.
Very good. Do we have some questions? Okay. If you've, while she's doing that, Bubba and Jim, would you take a couple of minutes and review the working group that you did so much on over a long period of time and just where that sets right now?
Okay, I'll take the first shot, and Bubba can fill in. So what Bubba and I did is to create a committee that worked for 2 years looking at every element of the student-athlete's life, from recruitment through graduation and beyond. Lissa was certainly part of that effort as well. If you've ever done process review in a business setting, that's what we were doing, basically process review and process redesign. And we literally met for 2 years in a committee that involved senior academic staff, senior athletic staff, faculty. We had a lot of input from students, and we would literally look at a very fine-grained level at everything we're doing about admissions, about advising, about scholarships, and either say, this looks like it rises to the standards of what we want to have at Carolina, or it doesn't. The great thing, I think, about this committee was that it wasn't a committee that was going to make recommendations to anybody. We had the power within this committee, because of who we are, to change things, and we changed a bunch of things. So in a nutshell, that's it. I would say we found, if I had to guess, 75% or so of what we found already we thought was in pretty good shape, and about another 25% we said, you know what, we can do better. As Doug or someone alluded to earlier, we've replaced that with a group that's now on an ongoing basis reviewing these, not at quite the level of intensity, but just checking to make sure that there's not ways to do even better in these areas. So we're not meeting with the same intensity, but we're not just, it wasn't just a moonshot, now we're done, because again, if you've been involved with this, you know you can't just allow processes to just sit around. You have to keep improving them.
Yeah, I can't add a lot to that. That's exactly what we did, and it was a great experience. As Jim just came on as the provost in his first year, it was a great opportunity for me to spend time with Jim and really learn about all of the other processes as it relates to the campus community and how we kind of keep each other in a check and balance on it.
Okay. The first question is, I think, just informational. Much reference has been made to the full cost of athletic scholarship. What is the approximate amount for in-state and for out-of-state?
In-state's about 20,000, 22, and out-of-state's about 40, 42.
In the early 90s, the NCAA President's Commission sought to limit the time commitment of athletes, number of contests, amount of time in contests. Can UNC play a leadership role in addressing this problem?
Yeah, I think we have tried to. You know, Lissa talked about the national agenda, and she mentioned a person by Nikki Moore, Dr. Nikki Moore. She's our new senior women's administrator. She actually replaced Beth Miller, who was here and did such a wonderful job for so long. She is a psychologist, has a PhD in psychology, and she was the university's representative to the conference in crafting some of the language for the time demands for student athletes. So it is a really challenging process to get in the middle of it. As Lissa mentioned, there's 80 people that vote on an autonomy basis, 65, so each school has a vote. So while you have a voice, you're somewhat one of a small voice in a larger crowd. So trying to make that impact is significant. We've had some discussion with our faculty athletics committee, and there are times where the institutional position is different than the conference position. And unfortunately, the conference position is usually the one that we have to carry forward to the national office. But I do think there's some principles that we have on our campus that we need to continue to maintain. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge for the NCAA, is that when our actions are inconsistent with our values. And I think that's our biggest challenge, is to remind ourselves of what are our values and are the decisions we make every single day consistent with that. And the reason I say that is this, the topic of satellite camps has gotten a lot of discussion lately. And I don't know how anybody feels about satellite camps or not, or how much detail you have about satellite camps, but fundamentally, satellite camps is a recruiting concept. And it's disappointing to me that we've dumbed it down to that, because football is the only sport that the high school coach is still relevant in the recruiting process, and the high school is still relevant. If we go down this path, which we're going, to satellite camps, there's going to be fewer and fewer college coaches going to high schools to recruit kids. We'll be recruiting kids out of satellite camps at various locations throughout the country, and over time, the football program at the high school, and we'll reduce our relationships with high school coaches, and football will then be recruiting just like every other sport we have, and it won't be through the secondary education. And I think that's one fundamental thing that is missed in the discussion. But that's an example of trying to solve a problem real quickly, because you've got guys that want to go out and recruit and do something. We have a knee-jerk reaction, and we create something that long-term is not in our best interest. But a quick, bad decision seems to trump a well-thought-out, long-term decision right now.
Bubba, these all seem to be focused on you. What is the impact of North Carolina's HB2 law on UN's recruiting and other aspects of athletics?
Right, now, wait a minute. Lisa's the attorney. It could have a significant impact on our ability to host. I thought it was interesting that the state of Minnesota banned their Division II or III baseball team from coming to a tournament that was going to be hosted in the state of North Carolina. You know, that's, you know, obviously the thing that's most concerning to me, or probably more concerning to Jim, is, you know, $1.4 billion worth of federal funds for research grants. I mean, that has a much more significant impact on higher education in the state of North Carolina than whether or not teams can come here and play or we can host a particular event. I mean, it is a big problem for our state, and unfortunately, athletics get such visibility, they'll want to know about your baseball tournament or your basketball tournament, when that is a very small part of the challenge that we face as a state relative to federal funding.
Yeah, Bubba's right. I mean, this goes far beyond athletics, although on that point, I did read this morning that Minnesota changed its mind, so.
Oh, did they?
That's what, it was in the Chronicle of Higher Education this morning, which tells you what I do with my mornings. You know, across the university, we have challenge with this. We have challenges with performing arts. We have this wonderful performing arts programs, and you know, challenges making sure that the people who have signed up to come and perform actually are willing to fulfill that commitment. We have students who write to us who say that they're not sure that they want to come to a university that's part of something like that. We have faculty, dean candidates who pull out of dean searches along the same lines. Of course, all of this pales in comparison to if the federal government actually decides that we're in violation of Title IX and Title IV. I'm not sure if I've got that right. I may turn to 7. Thank you. I mean, if that happens, it's cataclysmic. I mean, for the university, you really can't operate the university. The way that a contemporary university operates, one of this size and prominence, a good bit of the money is actually federal money, and of that, much of it goes to student scholarships, and then another big chunk of it goes to research. For example, we have roughly $800 million in federal research funding. Sorry, we have $800 of total funding. Of that, about 70% of it comes from the federal government. If you take away that, the university's research program grinds to a halt. So we'll know Monday whether the leaders of the state have decided to acquiesce to the federal government on their demands to do something about HB2 or not. But the stakes, I mean, this is not inconsequential.
Do all NCAA teams share in receiving money from playoffs, whether they generate money or not?
Yes, the NCAA basketball tournament is the primary funding mechanism for the NCAA, and there are multiple funds created by the tournament. Some of it is a participation. 40% of the money generated in the basketball tournament goes to a pool that is distributed to the schools that participate. 60% of the money are in other funds designated to support your athletic endeavor. So the 40% goes to the conference, and we all get equal shares, and they pay that out over a 6-year period. And the rest of it goes through the Academic Enhancement Fund or the Sports Sponsorship Fund. So there's multiple funds, and that goes to the conference as well, and then we get an equal distribution. So that is a long answer to say that it is equally shared by the conferences, and you get units and then divided equally.
Jim?
You might be surprised to know that some of the money generated by competition within the ACC goes beyond sports and actually goes back to students, not student athletes, but students more broadly. And so money that's come from the ACC this year has sponsored leadership development courses for academic administrators across the ACC, which people from all of the ACC schools have attended and which were actually held here. It's also sponsored a debate tournament, which has been held a couple of times. I think the most recent one was also here among all the ACC schools. And then most recently, there was a entrepreneurship contest, sort of a Shark Tank, if you're familiar with that concept, that was held at Georgia Tech that had competitors from all the ACC schools. So not only does it get spread to other sports, it gets spread to other activities that students participate in. So that's pretty cool, I think.
And that's part of the ACC Academic Consortium, which was originally created and funded when we went to a conference football championship. So that was the origin of that group and its funding.
So was this the first year that families of players competing in the Final Four were able to have travel funds?
This was actually the second year. When the college football playoff was created, like the night before, they made the determination that we could pay for families to attend the championship game, and that carried over to the Final Four last year. So this is the second year that we had the ability to help fund family travel to the NCAA championship for men's and women's basketball.
One concern that I've had is, here at Carolina we have 20-plus sports programs, and we're seeing universities across the country that are starting to decrease the number of sports programs to pour more money into specific ones. And my concern is we're going to limit the number of opportunities for bringing a wide range and diverse group of student athletes to campus, because, correct me if I'm wrong, Bubba, but a university that has 7 sports teams gets the same allocation as one that's funding 20.
There was a minimum.
Yeah, there's a minimum number of sports. To be Division I, you have to have a minimum of 16 sports, 9 for women, 7 for men. And the allocation, there's an allocation by sports sponsorship and grant and aids to try to support broad-based programming. Some conferences, the money goes directly to the school, and in others, it's equally distributed. In our case, it's equally distributed. So that's where I feel like some of our values and some of our actions are inconsistent, which 20 years ago, that fund was created to support broad-based programming, and I'm not sure we're actually doing that today.
What has changed in the last 15 to 20 years in the oversight that university administrators give to departments and their chairmen and programs? I think that's yours, Jim. I think you can dodge this one.
So the question was, what's happened over the last 15 years in terms of academic oversight over departments and chairmen? And is the sense here or here? Okay, so I would say that based on what we've learned about some of the things that happened here for a while, we have quite a bit more scrutiny over departments and chairs than we did before. We have now a policy that all department chairs need to be reviewed annually. And that includes their research, their teaching, and their leadership. I would say that in the past, many but not all of them were reviewed, and it really cost us that not all of them were reviewed. Also, we have ongoing review of departments. There was a funny kind of a missing piece in our review of programs and departments in the College of Arts and Sciences, which is that if a department didn't have a graduate program, then it didn't get reviewed, which sounds odd when you say it. I don't know why it happened that way, but it actually turned out to be very costly to us. So one of the changes that we've made is that all programs are reviewed, whether they have a graduate program, an undergraduate program, or both, and of course all department heads get reviewed on an annual basis. Since I'm on a roll with things like that, I'll also tell you that we now have a number of practices to ensure the academic integrity of all courses at the university. I won't be able to tell you all of them because I won't remember them, but a few of them are that each course, each individual course in the university is required to have a syllabus, even if it's an independent study course, and that those syllabi are collected, and there's a repository, and there's an audit that goes on of all syllabi. This is how you get to be provost, to know that the plural of syllabus is syllabi, by the way, even though I took French, not Latin, in school. So all of the syllabi are in a repository, and we audit them. We also, and I have to tell you mixed feelings about this, but this is the world that we're in. We actually spot check classrooms to make sure that faculty are indeed in the classroom teaching the course. So we do that. I suppose if we had done that 20 years ago, we wouldn't have gotten to be where we were. So, I see some of you nodding at that, and yeah, that's a control mechanism, and that's the kind of thing we need to do. I will tell you, as a lifetime faculty member and an academic, the idea that we have to do this is offensive to me. I do it. I'm the provost. It happens under my watch, but I'm not in love with it. But that's what we do. We also do, because of the problems that we had involved a large number of student athletes in certain courses, we also have a clustering analysis, which means that if student athletes comprise a certain percentage of the enrollments in a particular course, and I'm going to turn to Joy in a second because she's the person who actually is engaged with this. There's a different percentage for spring, fall, and summer that we institute a review to make sure that there's nothing unusual with respect to that course. Joy can tell you how many we've reviewed, but I can tell you that so far we haven't found any problems with any of these courses. Joy, do you want to say more about that?
I can tell you more about process than numbers. So this happens on a semester-by-semester basis, and Lissa Broome is involved in this, as well as the Associate Dean for General Education in the College of Arts and Sciences, as well as the Registrar. And then we added 2 members of the Faculty Athletics Committee. One thing that we've done across all these processes and these changes and reforms is there's not one person responsible for any more. There's multiple people, so there's checks and balances. It also allows for continuity over time. So it's not one person who does it for 10 years and they leave and someone comes in new. There's multiple people involved at all levels, where they do look at clustering and then evaluate if it's an issue or not. Lisa, you may know numbers. I don't.
There are multiple courses each semester that get caught by the screen, and the screen is 20% is the number. The general administration has adopted for all of the UNC system campuses a 25% threshold that they want campuses to conduct. So we're a little bit more rigorous than that at this point. And so we do look at that, and Abigail Panter, the dean of the undergraduate dean and education dean in the College of Arts and Sciences, is an important partner in this, and she communicates back with the department chairs, and they communicate with the professors, and just make sure that they understand the course. And we don't think there's anything inherently wrong about a class having 30 or 40% student athletes in it, and oftentimes it's because of when the class is offered vis-a-vis practice time, and it's just the most convenient time. Sometimes a lot of times I think it's probably word of mouth among students. We want to take classes together with our friends. It makes it easier to do group work and that kind of thing. And so some of them tend to congregate in some of the same classes. We want to ensure the academic integrity and rigor of those classes, and we're confident based on this process that we're engaged in now that is occurring.
And on our committee, we've discussed what does clustering mean, and making sure that we're not just doing numbers and checking off a box, but is it important, or is it clustered because it's a required course for a major? Is there a reason that individuals are taking it? And right now we have some new software available on the campus that the students can use, and we can also use, where students can actually plug in their other required times. They have other activities. So if someone works for the Daily Tar Heel or someone's a student athlete, they can plug in the times they do that, and they can run a program that will tell them what classes are available in their open times. And that's going to help us look at, do we need to be doing something with when classes are offered and not offered, that we're actually causing some of the clustering because of when we're offering classes, that we're not offering them at times that student athletes are available.
I'm not certain that this can be answered, but in the spirit of posing all the questions you've provided, how can you refute the charge of lack of institutional control?
Yeah, I don't know if I can specifically go into that one.
That's what the process is about, and
Right.
we'll learn later.
Yeah, we've got the allegations, and we'll try to figure out how we're going to respond to it, but I don't have a specific answer for you.
I must say, by the way, some of you have made it a little challenging, and the next time we do this, I'm going to insist that everyone print. The final one, unless there's somebody else who has a card that has not been picked up yet. We spent $3.2 million on the Weinstein report. No testimony was taken. It appeared that it was an effort to provide cover for the academic side of the university. Why?
That's transcribed, not taken.
Transcribed, okay?
Well, if the Weinstein report was designed to provide cover for the academic side of the university, we did a pretty terrible job of it. I mean, I think that the Weinstein report showed in excruciating detail some of the very problems I've just talked about over the last few minutes. A number of people on the academic side lost their jobs after the Weinstein report. I'm the one that sat and told them that they were losing their jobs. So I reject the premise of the question. That's not the reason we did the report. That's not the outcome of the report. I don't know what else to say about that.
Anne Louise, is that the last question?
I think so, unless anyone wants a card, I didn't hear one.
You know, Doug, we talked an awful lot about process and theory and all of that, but Jim mentioned it at the opening, that we had the student-athlete luncheon the other day, and the individual stories of the students are really incredible. And I know many of you know some of them, but I'd like to just mention one or two. I mean, when I think about the experience, about a college athletic experience, and think about Marcus Page, and think about a kid that comes here from Iowa and doesn't know a soul. His mom is a coach, and his sister goes to Wisconsin and plays basketball. He has an incredible 4-year experience here. He is a true leader on our campus. We look to him many, many times. We had him come over and speak to the Board of Trustees to talk about the day in the life of a student athlete. He was an incredible person on our campus. He was an incredible person nationally. He hits what arguably could be the greatest shot in NCAA basketball history, and that shot only lasts 4.7 seconds as the greatest shot ever. The other kid makes a shot and beats him, and the other kid was adopted by a family of a teammate of Marcus's. We go into the locker room, and the team is in the locker room. We're standing outside in a little foyer area, and Michael Jordan's at the game, and Roy says to Michael, he said, well, I'd like you to go in and say a few words to the team. So he goes in, the guys are, they're absolutely sobbing, crying, towels on their head, heads down, and Michael starts talking. Marcus isn't looking up. He looks up, he says he looks up and realizes Michael, he didn't know who was talking. He realized, oh my gosh, it's Michael Jordan, better pay attention. So he's paying attention to Michael. Then we have to open up the locker room after 10 minutes of cooling off and let the media in. And the locker room is about a third the size of this room here, and it is wall to wall with people with microphones in their faces. And he is truly remarkable in that setting. He then goes to the press room, and it's set up like this, name cards and all that. And to make that statement that I'm sure you've all heard, but I think it bears repeating. And they ask, what's the most difficult thing about this? The most difficult thing is taking this jersey off for the last time. And think about that statement of what that means to him. Hopefully he'll have a wonderful career. But when you think about the time demands of students, you think about the money associated. We think about all the stuff you read in the paper, stuff that we talked about, what happened in the last 20 years. But just think about that experience for that one student athlete. There's 799 other kids like that on this campus that are having an incredible experience. They're not perfect. None of us are perfect. We're all making mistakes every single day. But the way he represented the university, and I think it tells a story of what the university is about. And that is not atypical. It is atypical. He's a unique person, but it's not unique. It may not be every single person, but I just wanted to share that story and think about all the great things that intercollegiate athletics offers. It's a great rallying point. I look out here at the stadium. It was built back in the 20s. 50,000 people congregating in one place on the university. On Sunday, we'll congregate here for commencement. So it is a rallying point. Is it with some warts? Absolutely. But when you look at the success that these kids have and the amount of time they put into it, I think it's truly rewarding. It's worth the 2 years of aggravation and frustration of going through those processes and trying to figure out what is the right thing, because those are the kids that benefit by it. So didn't mean to go on that long, but I think it's just a wonderful story, and I don't want to lose sight of the fact that it is about students and their success in pursuing their ambitions, be it athletic or academic. So thanks, Doug. Thanks for letting us be here.
Please join me in thanking all of our panelists. And we'll see you shortly at the Old Students Club luncheon.